The massive ships came out of hyperspace like metal mountains breaking through invisible clouds. 10,000 vessels of the Zephyrian Imperial fleet stretched across the darkness of space, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of Sol. Each ship was a weapon of destruction that had turned entire worlds into smoking ruins. The smallest destroyer was 3 times larger than anything the humans had ever built. While the flagship dreadnoughts could crack planets in half with their main guns, Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 arms were crossed behind his back as he watched the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. Earth looked so small and helpless from here, so primitive. His red eyes, adapted for the harsh light of his homeworld, studied the sensor readings with satisfaction. "Report," he commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge like grinding stone. Commander Yithka, his second-in-command, approached with a datapad clutched in her 6-fingered hands. "The planet shows typical signs of a Class C civilization, Admiral. They use chemical rockets for space travel. Their communications are basic electromagnetic waves. No energy shields detected around their world. No orbital defense platforms." Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. In 300 years of conquest, he had never seen a world so defenseless. The humans had no idea what was coming for them. "What about their military?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would amuse him. "Primitive beyond measure," Yithka replied, her voice carrying the same contempt that all Zephyrians felt for lesser species. "They still use gunpowder weapons and crude missiles. Their largest warships are barely 200 meters long. The entire human fleet could not destroy even one of our escort frigates." Around the bridge, other officers hissed their laughter. The idea that such weak creatures had been allowed to spread across their solar system was almost insulting. The Galactic Empire had specific protocols for dealing with species like this. Complete submission or total destruction. There was no middle ground. Kethvar moved to his command chair, a massive seat made from the polished bones of his first conquest. He had been fighting the Empire's wars for 2 centuries. He had personally overseen the destruction of 47 civilizations. Some had been warriors who fought bravely before falling. Others had been cowards who begged for mercy they would never receive. But none had been as pathetically weak as these humans appeared to be. "Open a communication channel to the planet," he ordered. The bridge crew worked quickly to establish contact. Within moments, the main screen flickered and showed the blue-green world of Earth in all its doomed beauty. Kethvar began the ritual he had performed so many times before. "People of Earth." His words boomed across space, carried by the ship's powerful transmitters. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Imperial fleet. You now face the might of 10,000 ships, each one capable of destroying your entire world. Your civilization ends today." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in across whatever primitive communication networks the humans possessed. "However, the Empire is not without mercy for lesser species. You have one choice and one choice only. Surrender completely. Submit to Imperial rule. Become slaves to your betters. Do this, and some of you may be allowed to live. Refuse, and we will turn your planet into a ball of molten rock. You have exactly 1 hour to decide." The transmission ended. Now came the waiting. In all his centuries of conquest, Kethvar had never seen a species choose destruction over slavery. Oh, some pretended they would fight. Some made brave speeches about freedom and honor. But when the Imperial fleet showed up in their skies, when they saw the true scope of their enemy's power, they always broke. They always chose to live on their knees rather than die on their feet. The humans would be no different. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a response from Earth." That was unusually fast. Most species took at least half the allotted time to argue among themselves before accepting the inevitable. Kethvar gestured for the message to be played. A human voice came through the speakers, speaking in their crude language that the ship's computers quickly translated. The voice belonged to a female, though Kethvar found it hard to tell the difference between human males and females. They all looked equally weak to him. "This is Director Maria Santos of the United Earth Government," the voice said with surprising calmness. "We have received your ultimatum and discussed it thoroughly." Here it comes, Kethvar thought. The surrender. The begging. The promises of cooperation. "We decline," the voice continued simply. For a moment, the bridge fell completely silent. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to quiet. Kethvar's red eyes widened in genuine surprise. "Did she say decline?" he asked, certain he had misheard. "Yes, Admiral," the communications officer confirmed, checking his instruments twice. "The humans have refused our terms." Kethvar rose from his bone chair, all four of his arms spreading wide in a gesture of disbelief. In 300 years, no species had ever given such a short, simple rejection to Imperial demands. Usually there were at least threats or insults. Sometimes there were long speeches about their values and their determination to fight. But this was just dismissal. Are they insane? Commander Yithka whispered. Perhaps their primitive brains cannot process the scope of their situation, suggested the science officer. Many lower species have difficulty with numbers larger than they can count on their appendages. Kethvar studied the image of Earth on the screen. Could the humans really be so stupid? Did they truly not understand that 10,000 Imperial warships could sterilize every inch of their world? Perhaps their primitive technology had failed to detect the true size of his fleet. "Send them sensor data showing our complete forces," he ordered. "Let them count our ships. Let them see the power of our weapons. Give them 10 more minutes to reconsider." The data was transmitted to Earth in a package that their computers should be able to decode. It contained detailed information about Imperial firepower, ship numbers, and what would happen to their planet if they continued to resist. Kethvar was confident that once the humans saw the truth, they would immediately change their answer. 10 minutes passed. The response came from the same female voice, still speaking with that strange calm that was beginning to annoy Kethvar. "This is Director Santos again. We have reviewed your data. Our answer remains the same. We decline your ultimatum. Earth will not surrender." This time the bridge erupted in angry hisses and clicks. Several officers began shouting suggestions about how to make the humans suffer for their insolence, but Kethvar raised one hand for silence, his mind working through possibilities. "Perhaps this is some form of primitive humor," he said slowly. "Some species use jokes when facing death. Or perhaps," suggested the weapons officer, "they are simply too stupid to understand what we're telling them." Kethvar considered this. He had encountered species that were barely intelligent enough to qualify as sentient. Maybe the humans fell into that category. Maybe they literally could not understand the concept of Imperial power. "Very well," he said, settling back into his chair. "If they cannot understand words, they will understand actions. All ships prepare for orbital bombardment. We will start by destroying one of their major cities. Perhaps watching millions of their kind die will educate the survivors about the price of defiance." Around him, the bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. The great guns of the Imperial fleet began to charge, building up the energy needed to crack continents. Target locks engaged on major human population centers. But as Kethvar watched Earth on the main screen, he felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. A tiny nagging doubt that maybe, just maybe, these humans knew something he did not. The Imperial fleet hung in space like a swarm of metal wasps, their weapons charging for the destruction of Earth's largest cities. Admiral Kethvar watched the targeting displays with satisfaction as his gunners locked onto population centers across the human homeworld. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, all would be erased in the first salvo. That would surely make the surviving humans understand their situation. "All primary batteries charged and ready, Admiral," reported the weapons officer, his voice carrying the eager anticipation of someone about to witness beautiful destruction. "Fire when ready," Kethvar commanded. "Let us show these primitives the price of defying the Empire." But before the weapons officer could give the firing command, the tactical display suddenly lit up with a new contact. Something small had launched from Earth's surface and was heading directly toward the Imperial fleet. "Admiral," called the sensor operator, his voice filled with confusion. "We have a single contact approaching from the planet. It appears to be a small craft of some kind." Kethvar leaned forward in his bone chair, studying the display. The approaching object was tiny compared to his massive warships. It was barely larger than a fighter craft, certainly no bigger than one of the shuttle pods his ships used to transport supplies. "Specifications," he demanded. "Length approximately 50 meters. Mass readings are..." "Strange, Admiral. The sensors show conflicting data. Sometimes it appears solid, sometimes it seems to barely exist at all." "Weapons? No energy signatures consistent with known weapon systems, Admiral. No missile ports visible. No obvious armaments of any kind." Around the bridge, officers began to laugh. The humans had sent a single unarmed shuttle to face 10,000 Imperial warships. Even for a primitive species, this level of stupidity was remarkable. Perhaps they mean to surrender formally, suggested Commander Yithka. Some species prefer to deliver their submission in person. Or maybe they plan to ram one of our ships, laughed the weapons officer. Their little craft might scratch the paint on one of our hulls before it vaporizes. Kethavar was not amused by his crew's laughter. Something about this felt wrong. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had developed good instincts about potential threats. Those instincts were now screaming at him that this was not what it appeared to be. Open communications with the craft, he ordered. Within moments, a human voice filled the bridge. This time it belonged to a male, speaking with the same calm confidence that had marked the earlier communications. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the voice said. Though Kethvar noted the translation software seemed confused about whether the speaker was male or female. Human language was primitive in so many ways. "I am requesting that you immediately reverse course and leave this system." The bridge fell silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter again. Even Kethvar found himself clicking his mandibles in amusement. A single human in a tiny shuttle was making demands of the Imperial fleet. "Human," Kethvar spoke into the communication system, making no effort to hide his amusement. "I am Admiral Kethvar, commander of 10,000 warships. Each of my vessels carries enough firepower to destroy your entire civilization. You command a single small craft with no visible weapons. Exactly what do you think you can accomplish here?" "I think I can convince you to leave," came the reply. "But I hope I don't have to." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "Admiral, you and your fleet have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal from this system. Turn around now, return to wherever you came from, and this can end peacefully." The laughter on the bridge reached a crescendo. Several officers were actually holding their sides, overcome by the absurdity of the situation. Even Commander Yithka was hissing with mirth. "Or what?" Kethvar asked, deciding to play along with what was clearly some kind of primitive joke. "What will you do if we refuse?" "I will remove your fleet from our system," the human replied simply. This was too much. Kethvar rose from his chair, spreading all 4 arms wide in a gesture of theatrical disbelief. "Human, do you understand what you are facing? Look at your sensors. Count our ships. We have 10,000 vessels, each one capable of reducing planets to ash. Our smallest destroyer outmasses your entire craft by a factor of thousands. Our weapons can crack moons in half. And you and your tiny shuttle threaten to remove us?" 20 seconds, Admiral. The sheer audacity was almost refreshing. Kethvar had faced many enemies over the years, but none had ever shown such complete detachment from reality. He decided to give the human a demonstration of Imperial power, something that would penetrate even the thickest primitive skull. "Very well," he said. "Since you seem unable to grasp the situation through words alone, perhaps a practical demonstration will educate you. Weapons officer, select 50 of our closest dreadnoughts. Target that human craft with full power." "Admiral, 50 dreadnoughts?" the weapons officer asked. "That's enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human craft will be completely vaporized." "That is the point," Kethvar replied coldly. "Let this be a lesson to any other humans who might be watching. This is what happens when primitives threaten their betters." The weapons officer worked quickly, coordinating with 50 of the fleet's most powerful ships. Each dreadnought brought its main plasma cannon to bear on the tiny human craft. The energy buildup was visible even through the bridge's viewing ports. A growing blue-white glow as unimaginable power prepared to be unleashed. "All weapons locked on target," the weapons officer reported. "Ready to fire on your command, Admiral." Kethvar looked at the tactical display one last time. The human craft continued its steady approach, showing no signs of panic or evasive action. Either the pilot was incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Given what he had seen of human intelligence so far, Kethvar suspected the latter. 10 seconds. "Admiral," came the human voice again. "Fire," Kethvar commanded. 50 plasma beams, each one carrying enough energy to boil oceans, lanced out across space toward the tiny human craft. The beams were visible as brilliant blue lines against the darkness, converging on their target with mathematical precision. In seconds, the most powerful weapons in the known galaxy would strike the human shuttle. Kethvar watched, expecting to see the craft simply cease to exist. Instead, he saw something that made his mind struggle to process what his eyes were telling him. The plasma beams struck the human craft and vanished, not deflected, not scattered, not absorbed in any normal sense. They simply disappeared, as if they had never existed at all. The human shuttle continued its approach completely unharmed. What just happened? Kethavar whispered. I don't know, Admiral, the weapons officer stammered. All sensors confirm direct hits on target, but the energy readings show nothing. The plasma just stopped existing when it touched their craft. 5 seconds. Admiral, the human voice said, still perfectly calm. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Admiral Kethavar felt something he had forgotten existed. Fear. Real, cold fear that started in his chest and spread through his entire body. All ships, he spoke into the fleet communication system, his voice no longer carrying its usual confidence. Full alert status. Prepare all weapons. Something is very wrong here. Time's up, said Commander Chen. The human craft began to move. Admiral Kethavar watched the tactical display in growing horror as the tiny shuttle suddenly accelerated from a gentle drift to impossible speeds. One moment it was crawling toward his fleet at normal sublight velocity. The next moment it was moving faster than anything he had ever seen, weaving between his massive warships like a dart through a forest of metal giants. Track that craft, he shouted, but his sensor operators were already struggling with readings that made no sense. Admiral, the speed readings are impossible, reported the chief sensor officer, his voice tight with panic. The craft is moving at significant percentages of light speed, but showing no relativistic effects. No time dilation, no mass increase. It's as if the laws of physics don't apply to it. Kethavar gripped the arms of his bone chair as he watched the human craft dance through his fleet. It moved with precision that no living pilot should possess, threading paths between ships with clearances measured in meters, while traveling at speeds that should have reduced any biological crew to paste. All ships, track and destroy that target, he commanded through the fleet communication system, all weapons free. Bring it down now. Across the Imperial fleet, 10,000 warships turned their guns toward the single human craft. The space around it filled with energy beams. Missiles and kinetic rounds as the most powerful military force in the galaxy focused its attention on one small target. None of it mattered. The human craft moved through the storm of fire like it existed in a different dimension. Plasma beams passed through the space it occupied without touching it. Missiles exploded harmlessly as their target simply wasn't where they expected it to be. Even the massive kinetic rounds fired by the dreadnought seemed to slide past the craft as if space itself was bending around it. How is this possible? Commander Yithka whispered, staring at the display in disbelief. That was when Kethavar noticed something that made his blood turn to ice. As the human craft passed near his ships, they began to disappear, not exploding, not burning, not showing any signs of damage at all. They simply ceased to exist, vanishing from space as completely as if they had never been built. One moment a massive Imperial destroyer was there, bristling with weapons and armor. The next moment there was nothing but empty space. Report, Kethavar screamed. What's happening to my ships? The sensor operator's hands shook as he worked his controls. Admiral, I'm reading complete molecular dissolution. The ships aren't being destroyed in any conventional sense. Their matter is being unmade, converted back to base energy and dispersed. That's impossible. No weapon in the galaxy can do that. The energy signatures suggest manipulation of fundamental forces, Admiral. This isn't just advanced technology. This is control over the basic structure of reality itself. Kethavar watched in growing terror as more ships vanished. The human craft moved through his fleet like death itself, and wherever it passed, Imperial warships simply stopped existing. The process was silent, clean, and absolute. There were no explosions, no debris fields, no survivors. Just empty space where mighty warships had been moments before. All ships retreat, he commanded. Full reverse maximum speed. Get away from that thing. But retreat was impossible. As soon as his ships began to turn away, they found their engines failing. Not damaged, not destroyed, but simply refusing to function. The human craft had somehow disabled the propulsion systems of 10,000 warships without firing a single visible shot. Admiral, the communications officer called out, his voice cracking with fear. We're receiving a transmission from the human craft. Put it through, Kethavar said, though he dreaded what he was about to hear. Commander Chen's voice filled the bridge again, still carrying that same infuriating calm. Admiral Kethvar, I warned you this would happen. Your fleet has now lost 800 ships. I can continue this process until none of you remain. Or you can listen to what I'm about to tell you. 800 ships. In less than 2 minutes, the humans had erased 800 Imperial warships from existence. The mathematics of it were staggering. At this rate, the entire fleet would be gone in less than half an hour. What are you? Kethvar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm a human being, Admiral, just like the billions of people you came here to murder. The difference is that humanity has had some time to develop since we first reached for the stars. This is impossible. No species can manipulate matter at this level. No civilization has ever achieved control over fundamental forces. You're thinking about this backwards, Admiral. You see a small craft and assume it's limited by size. You see organic beings and assume we're limited by biology. You see a young civilization and assume we're limited by time. But what if all those assumptions are wrong? The human craft had stopped moving through the fleet, but ships continued to vanish around it. Now Kethvar could see the pattern. Every ship that had fired on the craft was disappearing one by one. The humans were being selective about their destruction. What do you want? He asked. I want you to understand something very important, Commander Chen replied. Your empire conquers worlds by finding species weaker than yourselves and crushing them with superior firepower. That strategy works when you're the strongest force in the galaxy. But what happens when you encounter something stronger? Another 100 ships vanished in the span of a few seconds. The tactical display was beginning to look sparse as entire sections of the Imperial formation simply ceased to exist. You're not just more advanced, Kethvar said, the truth finally beginning to dawn on him. You're so far beyond us that we can't even comprehend the gap. Now you're starting to understand. Admiral, your species has been playing a game where you thought you were the final boss. But you just wandered into a completely different game with completely different rules. Kethvar looked around his bridge. His officers sat frozen at their stations, staring at displays that showed their mighty fleet being casually erased by what they had thought was a primitive species. Some were weeping. Others had simply shut down, unable to process what they were witnessing. How long? He asked quietly. How long what, Admiral? How long have humans been capable of this? There was a pause before Commander Chen answered. We've had the ability to manipulate fundamental forces for about 300 years now. We've had practical control over space-time for 200. We achieved true mastery over matter and energy roughly 150 years ago. 300 years. The same amount of time Kethvar had been conquering primitive worlds, humanity had been developing godlike powers. While he had been burning planets with plasma cannons, they had been learning to rewrite the laws of physics. Why? He asked. If you've had this power for centuries, why didn't you expand? Why didn't you build an empire? Why did you stay hidden in this one system? Because unlike your species, Admiral, we learned something important as we gained power. We learned that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting what matters to you. More ships vanished. The count was now over 1,500. 1,500 Imperial warships gone without a trace, so what happens now? Kethvar asked. Do you kill us all? Do you reduce our homeworlds to atoms? That depends entirely on what you choose to do next, Admiral. This demonstration isn't about showing you how easily we could destroy you. It's about showing you that the age of conquest through superior firepower is over. We're offering you a chance to evolve beyond that. Kethvar stared at the tactical display, watching his magnificent fleet dwindle ship by ship. Everything he had believed about the galaxy, about power, about his own species' place in the universe was crumbling around him. What do you want from us? He whispered. We want you to make a choice, Admiral. The same choice we made when we gained this power. What kind of species do you want to be? Admiral Kethvar sat in stunned silence as he watched his mighty fleet continue to disappear ship by ship. 2,000 vessels gone now. 2,000 ships that had taken decades to build, crewed by millions of his people, erased from existence as casually as wiping dust from a table. The human craft continued its methodical work, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Admiral, his science officer called out, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and fascination. I'm getting readings that I need you to see. Kethvar turned toward the science station, grateful for any distraction from the wholesale destruction of everything he had spent his life building. What is it? He asked. Sir, I've been analyzing the energy patterns from the human craft. The readings are impossible. According to our instruments, that small vessel is generating more power than our entire fleet combined. More power than the largest stars in the galaxy. That can't be right. Check your instruments. I've checked them 17 times, Admiral. The readings are consistent. But that's not the strangest part. The science officer's hands trembled as he pulled up new data on his screen. Sir, I don't think that's actually a craft at all. Kethavar moved closer to the science station, Commander Yithka following behind him. The displays showed energy readings that hurt his brain to look at, numbers so large they seemed meaningless. Explain, he demanded. Sir, the object is generating localized distortions in space-time itself. It's manipulating gravity, electromagnetic fields, and quantum structures in ways that should be impossible. But more importantly, the energy signature suggests that what we're looking at isn't a ship with a crew inside. It's a projection, a manifestation of some kind of larger system. You mean it's not real? Oh, it's real, Admiral. But I think what we're seeing is just the visible expression of something much larger, like seeing the tip of an iceberg, except the iceberg is the size of a solar system. Kethavar felt his legs give out slightly, and he gripped the edge of the science station for support. Are you telling me that this entire demonstration is being performed by something we can't even see? That's exactly what I'm telling you, sir. And if my calculations are correct, the actual source of this power isn't even in this solar system. The quantum entanglement pattern suggests the controlling intelligence is operating from somewhere else entirely, possibly light years away. The implications hit Kethavar like a physical blow. Not only were the humans impossibly advanced, but they were controlling reality-warping technology from across interstellar distances. The small craft wasn't even their real weapon. It was just a finger puppet they were using to demonstrate their capabilities. Sir, the communications officer interrupted. The human is speaking again. Commander Chen's voice filled the bridge once more, still maintaining that maddening calm. Admiral, I can sense that your people are beginning to understand the true scope of what they're facing. Your science officer is quite perceptive. Yes, what you're seeing is a localized projection. The actual systems controlling this demonstration are distributed across several star systems, operating through quantum entanglement networks that your species won't develop for another 50,000 years. 50,000 years. The number was so vast that Kethavar couldn't even properly conceptualize it. Humanity wasn't just more advanced than his species. They were so far ahead that the Zephyrians were like insects compared to gods. But I want you to understand something important, Chen continued. This isn't about showing off our superior technology. This is about giving you information you need to make an informed decision about your future. What decision? Kethavar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The decision about what kind of species the Zephyrians want to be going forward. Admiral, your empire has conquered 47 civilizations over the past 3 centuries. You've destroyed billions of lives, wiped out entire cultures, reduced thriving worlds to slave colonies. You've done this because you believed that might makes right. More ships vanished from the tactical display, 3,000 now. Nearly a third of his entire fleet gone without a trace. But here's what you need to understand. Chen's voice continued. Humanity has been watching. We've been aware of your empire's activities for the past 200 years. We've seen every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every civilization you've destroyed. Then why didn't you stop us? Kethavar demanded, anger finally breaking through his fear. If you've had this power for centuries, why did you let us kill billions of innocent beings? Because, Chen replied, interference has consequences. When a godlike civilization starts dictating the development of lesser species, it tends to stunt their growth. We've learned that sometimes species need to find their own path to enlightenment, even if that path is ugly. So you let us commit genocide because it might teach us a lesson? No, Admiral. We let you commit genocide because we were hoping you would learn to stop on your own. We kept waiting for your species to evolve beyond the need for conquest, to develop empathy for other forms of life, to realize that true strength comes from protecting the weak, not exploiting them. Kethavar found himself thinking about all the worlds he had personally destroyed, all the beings who had begged for mercy that he had never given, all the civilizations that had tried to surrender, only to be enslaved anyway because the empire needed workers for its factories and soldiers for its armies. But you never learned, Chen continued. Century after century you became more brutal, more efficient at destruction. And now you've come to Earth, intending to do to us what you've done to 47 other species. So this is revenge? Kethvar asked. No, Admiral. This is an intervention. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Kethvar had heard that term before, used by psychologists dealing with individuals whose behavior had become destructive to themselves and others. The idea that an entire species might need an intervention was both humbling and terrifying. What does that mean? He asked quietly. It means that humanity has decided the Zephyrian Empire's reign of terror ends today. Not through genocide, not through conquest, but through education. 4,000 ships had now vanished from the display. His fleet was being systematically reduced, but Kethvar noticed something interesting. The ships that were disappearing were the ones that had fired on the human craft. The vessels that had held their fire, either through mechanical failure or crew hesitation, were being left alone. You're not destroying us indiscriminately, he observed. No, we're not. Every ship that vanishes contained crew members who actively participated in trying to kill me. But the ships where the crews refused orders, or where weapon systems mysteriously failed, or where someone decided not to fire on what they thought was a defenseless target, those ships remain. Kethvar looked around his own bridge. His weapons officer was staring at his console in confusion. Sir, the officer said slowly, my targeting systems have been disabled. I can't lock onto the human craft even if you order me to fire. When did that happen? Kethvar demanded. I'm not sure, sir. The systems appear to be functional, but every time I try to acquire a target lock, the computers refuse to comply. Commander Chen's voice carried what might have been amusement. We've been making some adjustments to your systems, Admiral. Ships whose crews show potential for growth get to keep their crews. Ships whose crews are too far gone, well, you can see what happens to those. Kethvar realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just demonstrating their superior firepower. They were conducting a massive psychological evaluation of his entire fleet, judging each ship and each crew member individually. They were sorting his people into categories, those who could be saved and those who were beyond redemption. How many? He asked quietly. How many what, Admiral? How many of my people do you judge to be beyond saving? There was a long pause before Chen answered. More than I had hoped, Admiral. Fewer than I had feared. The destruction stopped. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. For the past hour, he had watched helplessly as his mighty fleet was systematically reduced from 10,000 ships to barely 3,000. The human craft hung motionless in space, no longer moving through his formation like an angel of death. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the destruction had been. Admiral, his communications officer said quietly, the human is speaking again. Commander Chen's voice filled the bridge for what Kethvar suspected would be the final time. Admiral Kethvar, the demonstration is complete. 7,000 of your ships have been removed from this reality. Their crews were given the choice to participate in an act of genocide, and they chose to participate. They have been relocated to a dimension where they can no longer harm others. Relocated? Kethvar asked. You mean they're not dead? Death is such a crude concept, Admiral. Why destroy consciousness when you can simply redirect it? The crews of those 7,000 ships now exist in a reality crafted specifically for them. They can continue their lives, but they can never again harm another sentient being. The idea that the humans could casually create alternate dimensions for their enemies was somehow more terrifying than simple destruction would have been. It spoke to a level of power that made the entire concept of resistance meaningless. What about the rest of us? He asked. The remaining 3,000 ships contained crews that showed potential for growth. People who hesitated before following orders to commit murder. People whose consciences made them question their actions. People who chose mercy when they could have chosen violence. Kethvar looked around his bridge. His crew sat at their stations, still processing what they had witnessed. He realized that he was probably only still alive because he had asked questions instead of immediately ordering maximum destruction. So what happens now? He asked. Now you get to make the most important choice in Zephyrian history, Chen replied. You can continue down the path your empire has been following for centuries. You can return to your homeworlds, rebuild your fleet, and continue conquering weaker species. If you choose that path, humanity will stop you. Not through conquest, but through intervention. Every time you try to harm another species, we will be there. The threat was delivered so matter-of-factly that it carried more weight than any amount of shouting or dramatic posturing could have achieved. Or, Kethvar prompted, or you can choose evolution. You can accept that the age of empires built on conquest is over. You can learn to find purpose in creation instead of destruction, in protection instead of exploitation, in cooperation instead of domination. And if we choose that path, then humanity will help you. We will share knowledge. We will guide your species toward technologies that improve life instead of ending it. We will teach you to find strength in mercy instead of weakness in violence. Kethavar considered this offer carefully. After 3 centuries of conquest, the idea of building instead of destroying seemed almost foreign. But as he looked at what remained of his fleet, he realized that the alternative was extinction. There are others, aren't there? He asked suddenly. Other species like humanity. Other civilizations that have moved beyond conquest. Yes, Admiral. Humanity is not unique in having transcended the need for empire. There are dozens of species across the galaxy who have chosen cooperation over domination. We call ourselves the gardeners. Gardeners? Because we tend to younger species. We protect them from predators like your empire. We guide them toward enlightenment when they're ready. And we intervene when necessary to prevent genocides. The name was beautiful in its simplicity. Instead of conquerors or rulers, they saw themselves as cultivators of life and civilization. How long do I have to decide? Kethavar asked. You have as long as you need, Admiral, but understand that the decision isn't really yours alone. Every member of your species will need to choose individually. Some will choose evolution. Others will cling to the old ways. Those who choose growth will be welcomed. Those who choose destruction will be stopped. Kethavar felt the weight of his entire civilization resting on his shoulders. Everything the Zephyrians had built, everything they believed about themselves was being challenged. They could adapt or they could fade into irrelevance. Before I answer, he said slowly, I need to ask you something. Why spare any of us? Why not simply remove our entire species and be done with the threat? Chen's response came without hesitation. Because every conscious being has value, Admiral, even you. Even after everything you've done, you still have the potential to become something better. Humanity learned long ago that the true measure of a civilization isn't its power to destroy, but its willingness to save even its enemies. The words hit Kethavar harder than any weapon could have. For 3 centuries, he had seen mercy as weakness. He had viewed compassion as a flaw to be exploited in his enemies. But here was a species that could have erased the Zephyrians from existence with a thought, and instead they were offering redemption. I speak for myself and my fleet, Kethavar said finally. We choose evolution. We choose to learn from humanity and the other gardener species. We choose to become something better than what we have been. That is wise, Admiral. But understand that this choice comes with immediate consequences. Your remaining ships will be escorted back to Zephyrian space, but they will be equipped with new technology. Weapons systems that can only be used defensively. Engines that will refuse to travel to inhabited systems without proper authorization. Communication arrays that will allow the gardeners to monitor your activities. You're going to put us under supervision. We're going to help you take your first steps toward a better future. Think of it as rehabilitation, Admiral. Your species has spent centuries learning how to be efficient killers. Now you need to learn how to be effective protectors. Kethavar nodded slowly. The terms were humiliating for a proud warrior species, but they were also merciful beyond anything he would have offered a defeated enemy. What about the worlds we've conquered? He asked. The species we've enslaved? They will be liberated, of course. But here's something interesting, Admiral. Several of the species your empire subjugated have developed remarkable technologies during their time as slaves. When they're freed, they may choose to join the gardeners themselves. Your victims might become your teachers. The irony was not lost on Kethavar. The Zephyrians had spent centuries believing they were the apex predators of the galaxy, only to discover they were actually the students in need of the most basic lessons about civilization. Commander Chen, he said, on behalf of the Zephyrian people, I formally surrender our empire to the Gardener Alliance. We ask for your guidance in learning to become a species worthy of life among the stars. Surrender isn't necessary, Admiral. Partnership is what we're offering. Welcome to the next phase of galactic civilization. As Kethavar watched, his remaining ships began to change. New technologies flowed through their hulls like living metal, transforming weapons of conquest into tools of exploration and protection. His communications array lit up with messages from other species, other civilizations that had once been enemies but were now allies in the great work of nurturing life across the galaxy. For the first time in 3 centuries, Admiral Kethavar felt something he had forgotten existed. Hope for a future worth building instead of conquering. The age of empires was over. The age of gardens had begun.